Hi girls. This is obviously our first video, so I just wanted to go over a couple of things just before we get started. Obviously, this is a way for us to see the game from a different perspective. So hopefully, you guys are able to go back and watch games. You don't necessarily have to watch every minute of every game, but going back and looking at things like this is a great way for you to see the bigger picture. And like we're going to go over in the next kind of 10 minutes here. It allows us to identify some things that we're doing well, some things that we can improve, and it gives us some reference points for training. Now, just a couple of other things to think about. There's going to be mistakes in here. There's going to be times where I'm kind of maybe providing a little bit of constructive criticism to players. I'm hoping to try and praise some players too, but it's important to understand that this is a safe space, so it's not ever intended to be a time that we criticize players or kind of turn it into a position of bullying or picking on people. That's certainly not what it is. All right, there's going to be moments in here for everybody to hopefully try and learn from. So it's important that we approach it that way. And just like we talked about earlier in the season, right, mistakes are crucial in our development. So this video is all about build outs. This is from very early in our game against Bethesda. In fact, this is our first build out, I think. So, girls, this is our first build out in Bethesda, and I think it's a really good example of one, our spacing, right? So we've got our wingers high, Ella's out of shot here, but she's high and wide. We have Annalise and Yaya who are in high positions, and then we have Ashlyn in this wide position over here. So there's already passing lanes starting to open themselves up. Bethesda were pretty aggressive in their press. And I like the confidence and the bravery to play into Emmy right here. Because again, what that does is invite the press even more. Okay, and again, we've talked already in our early sessions about having the bravery to invite the press. Right, if we don't invite the press, it becomes harder to play through. All right, but we've attracted 3 players to around the ball here, which now means when we do play around or through, we're actually going to have more space ahead of the ball. Okay, the only thing I would say here for you, Emmy, is can you put this ball into a space where Ava can now step into it? Okay, because if you can put that ball into that space in front of Ava, right, now she's stepping in. Now she can use Mal if she needs to, but maybe Ava can even drive out and maybe she can be the one who plays forward. But your pass goes a little bit behind Ava, and that just slows us down just a little bit, even though we can still get the ball to Mal. Okay, once we get the ball to Mal, then Mal, you try and play that straight ball down the line. You can see we're kind of in a 2v2 situation here out of the ball, but you'll notice that Yaya is in tons and tons of space in the center of the field. Okay, so um, when the ball is in these wide areas, you're very, if a team is good at sliding across, you're very, you're probably not likely to be able to play a straight ball down the line, but a ball into the middle of the field then maybe becomes a little bit more of an option. So you got the ball into your far-sided midfielder, and obviously again, if that's completely closed off, then maybe you're looking to go back into one of your central midfielders. Emmy, you've run ahead of the ball here, all right. And here's what I've kind of said to you. Whereas if we can get you just underneath the ball in case Mal needs to turn out, then you can also maybe be the option to play into to Yaya or maybe switch the ball out to Ash or Aaliyah on this side. But overall, I think a decent example of breaking that initial press, and then it's just that next layer of what we do after that. Another example of a really good build out. This one we are a little bit more direct because we can be. Okay, Maddie, we talked about on that last video. Maybe there was the option for you to play straight through to Ashland. Okay, it wasn't the safest ball. I'm certainly not upset that you didn't play it. But now we've got Ava on her right foot. She sees the gap. Annalise, you take a brilliant position behind their midfielders, and we are able to be a little bit more direct in this situation. Annalise receives on the half turn. And now we've effectively done exactly what we want to do. We want to play through the press. We want to receive the ball behind their midfield line. And now we're facing forward. Okay. And all we're probably missing here is just a little bit of a more weighted through ball. I'm just going to go back a little bit. If we can get now, Ashlyn, you cutting across into that space, and Yaya can play that little through ball in between the centre back and the right full back, then we probably have you going to goal. So Asher probably just missing that run, and then Yaya, I would even just play it anyway and almost make Ashland run. But even so, we end up getting the ball wide. We've moved our whole team up the field, and now we're in a good position to attack. Okay, but we go back to that start again. Again, just another really good example of our spacing to open up passing lanes ahead of the ball. And then Annalise, you do a really good job of receiving on the half turn. And obviously we find Yaya in space as well. So two really good examples there of us being able to play through the press in different ways. One time we play in, back, and around. And the second one, we're able to just play through straight away because that passing lane is open. A couple of other build-outs to look at. This is from the same game. And this is an example where we can't necessarily play forward straight away. So it's important for us as we play these games to understand again how the opposition is pressing us, and they've been pretty aggressive. And either way, she's energetic and she's pressing at every opportunity. So Maria, this ball you give to Maddie, and there's a couple of little fixes here, so I'm certainly not going to put the blame on just one person in particular. But this ball you give to Maddie is in front of her, and that basically is telling Maddie to go and step out with the ball, all right? And this ultimately ends up putting Maddie under a little bit of pressure. So this might be an opposition where, because we know that this striker is going to press, maybe we're just playing Maddie's feet, and then as Maddie gets pressed, we can just go right back to you, Maria. And now we've just kind of wasted, 3 or 4 seconds of that striker's energy. But just by you putting the ball in front of Maddie, it kind of almost invites that striker to arc a run and stop Maddie from going back to you. Maddie, from a position standpoint, because Aaliyah's higher in this situation, I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer this in your head. What do you think you could maybe do from this goal kick? So what I'm thinking here is if you can now maybe start yourself a little bit higher and wider. So if you get yourself on the top of the 18 here, okay, now this pass from Maria to you is longer. Takes longer for this player to close you down, and then you have a little bit more time on the ball to maybe find a layer or to maybe play the pass through that you end up wanting to play. Okay, and then once the ball does go, I would just say, Aaliyah, we maybe just need you to drop down a little bit earlier. I mean, that pass to you is on, but maybe you can just drop down a couple of extra yards just to make sure that we can kind of hit your back foot and just keep possession. But we end up just kind of playing ourselves into a little bit of pressure here. Again, I'm not sure Maddie really wants to give the ball to you here because that could get cut out. So if you just drop a couple of yards. But again, these are the types of teams we might play where they're going to press. And this is where we may just need to have a little bit more patience, where we go to our centre-back and back to our goalkeeper, maybe to our full-back and back to our centre-back and back to our goalkeeper. Because ultimately we want to try and tire those teams out. If they're going to press like crazy, we want to tire them out. And then when they finally do make that big step forward, just like we showed in the first clip, then playing through becomes a little bit easier. The final clip from this game, and this is just a really small detail that it's for Maria, but this is basically for anybody in any position. I just want you to look at what Maria's first touch does. So she opens out to the right, and that starts everybody moving this way. Now, this winger especially kind of starts already basically predicting that Maria is going to play to, I think it's probably Antonia, sorry. And so by the time you play that ball, Maria, she's already on her way, okay? And then you end up playing the ball in the air, which is kind of tough to control, and now Antonia is under pressure, okay? So a couple of lessons to learn from that. One is that your first touch can do a lot, both positive and negative, okay? Now, I think that first touch is great, Maria, but maybe once you see that striker or that winger is going to start closing the ball down, maybe you just turn and go back the other way, or maybe you can just stop that action of playing the pass and just relax. And maybe then a pass lane into Emmy becomes open. Maybe you can even kind of reset yourself and play a longer ball into Kaylin or Lucci, gives chance for Maddie to open up. But your first touch does a lot here. And I think it's a really good first touch. But then I think the pass to Antonia is probably not necessarily the right decision. But that's good for anybody, okay? Centre backs, central midfielders, outside backs. Your first touch can move the defenders around, all right? And that's really what I wanted to show with this little clip. So another perspective, this is in the Loudon game, and this is, I think, a situation we want to, we want to try and make the most of more often than not. It's certainly a pattern that hopefully we're going to be able to find ourselves in quite often. So as this ball travels out to Aaliyah at left back, again, what it does is it attracts a lot of pressure. These two white central midfielders start sliding over. Aaliyah gets pressure from her back, so Aaliyah, you're not necessarily going to be able to turn out and play forward straight away here. So we need options back in the middle of the field. Okay, and again, Emmy, your kind of closest marker is getting attracted towards the ball. So here's where your movement at this point is probably just to actually not move at all, is just stand still. If anything, you want to kind of back away from the ball and start opening up your hips, right? But what you do is you keep checking in towards the ball. So when Aaliyah does finally want to use you, you're close to the ball, and then you allow basically pressure to come from both sides, right? But if you can imagine right now, if you're just back 10 yards, almost kind of towards Kaylin, that would then be a cue for Kaylin to get herself a little bit higher. Then you can probably turn out and basically pick your pass. You can hit your right winger, you can hit Kaylin's feet, you can hit your right fullback, you can pretty much hit whatever pass you want. But by the time you receive it, pressure comes, you're facing back, you're under pressure, and they end up picking you off and end up kind of having a chance to counter-attack against us. Okay, so if we just watch that one through again, Emmy, your movement should be to find that central pocket of space where you can receive on the half turn and turn out. And if we do that consistently, then what you'll find is when our fullbacks get the ball, their first thought is not necessarily to always go down the line. Then they'll start looking for you to come inside. And that kind of goes for anybody. Annalise, Kaylin, anybody else who plays as a holding midfielder. Don't get attracted to the ball. Okay, we want you to be the person who can switch play for us. And then fullbacks, it's something for you to look for, all right? And that's why I talk about keeping your options open when you receive it. Yes, we want you to be able to see your winger down the line, but we also want you to have the option to come back inside to a central midfielder, or if that's not on, maybe go back to your centre back as well. Okay. And this is for our movement a little bit higher up the field. So this one's specifically for you, Annalise. And this is just to highlight kind of the movement of our attacking midfielders and how their movement ahead of the ball can influence what we do on the ball, with our back four players. So I'm fine with the initial, we play out to Ava. Ava, you're able to find Mal and kind of break that initial line of pressure, which is good. Kaylin, you do get attracted a little bit to the ball to begin with, but you actually end up finding yourself in a good little space. Okay, so it's a little bit different to our previous one where I would say that the spaces to open up. You end up finding a good little pocket. Ella, I'm okay with you kind of being in the position you're in because you're offering Mal that initial passing option if she needs it. It's just starting to get a little bit tight though. Okay, and here's where I want to talk to you, Annalise. So your movement right now is to check in and just condense that one even further. Now, I don't really think that you want to be receiving the ball, checking in kind of on this side of the defender. Okay, now if you could back up 10 yards and Mal could hit you, that would be a position you would want to receive it in. Okay, I don't think it's a ball that in the position Mal's in right now she would hit, but in the long run, if you're going to be our attacking midfielder or one of our two attacking midfielders, I think this is the position you want to be in, basically, just ahead of that referee. So if we can get off this side, all right, then you're in that area. So kind of like we showed you in that earlier video against Bethesda, when you receive the ball beyond their midfield line, this is a good position for you to be in right now, okay? Another thing that you're doing by checking in is probably cutting off a passing lane to Yaya, okay? Because now one defender can basically stop the ball to you and to Yaya. So, Annalise, if you're the attacking high or kind of the highest attacking midfielder, or if you're on the weak side, just keep yourself away from this. And what you'll notice is as Kaylin gets it, okay, then you probably are going to be an option in this area right here. But just to quickly touch on it again, you've blocked the passing lane to Yaya. You're not really a passing option. And we don't have this option in here. What we end up having to do is pull whoever our left winger is, maybe Lucci at this point, she's probably then that option, but then that takes away from our width. So high midfielders, just be a little bit more patient, stay away from the play. You're probably going to receive the ball in kind of the second or third pass, not necessarily that first pass. Couple of other things to think about here, which I like though. Ella, I love your movement. Right, so we talked about you initially checking in, but once we see that we have time on the ball and we have the opportunity to play in behind, you make this run. And Kaylin, we almost end up, or we try and get that ball in behind maybe, and can't quite get it off. But again, just a couple of little spacing things. I think the patience is good to play short. But again, I think Annalise, really the main thing from you is we just want you in this area right here. That allows Lucci to stay wider. Probably allows us a passing lane into Yaya as well. So finally from this game, we have the goal against us, which again, I think can just be solved with really just us not being attracted towards the ball. So I already talked to Emmy about this, and Annalise, Kaylin, this one's for you. So as the ball gets played out to Ava here, if you watch your movement, all right, your movement is to kind of slide across, and you don't come across too far, but you come across into an area where I don't really think you want to receive this ball in here because it's tight. You don't really have any options, right? Even if Ava gives you the ball in here now, you're under pressure. You're kind of facing away. You're kind of facing towards the sideline, so it would be hard for you to go back to Maria. So I think this is a position where honestly you just need to keep yourself central and keep yourself open, and that way, if this striker kind of makes arcs their run to kind of force the ball back inside, now we can play you maybe on the half turn. We don't have to go back to Maria. You're also going to help to keep this passing lane open into our attacker midfielder, which is probably Annalise. You can see she's kind of just starting to check in. Yes. Okay, so you've maybe just closed this off a little bit. But what it also does is as this ball goes back to Maria, now Maria doesn't have a forward central option. Okay, and she probably needs it here. All right, because this wing is closing down Antonia. I think a little moment of hesitation from Maria comes from the fact that she doesn't want to give the ball to Antonia because she's under pressure. So if we'd have just kept you central in here, all right, now all we would probably need to do is play the ball into you. You would bounce the ball back out to Ava, and then we'd have beat this girl's press right here. Okay, but again, I think if we just go back, the fact that you work your way across means that you're not in position to be that little bounce option, and Maria ends up getting pickpocketed, and it leads to a goal. So again, just a little note for our central midfield players to generally not get attracted in towards the ball, all right, and to try and be on the half turn and try and face forward and be an option to switch out the other side. Now, listen, maybe we could have still used you at this point, right? If Maria had have just played this ball into you, you probably could have still got it back. But just by staying more central, we make that a little bit more obvious, okay? But, listen, these mistakes happen. It's fine. We learn from them. But just from a general pattern perspective here, and just so we can see this moving forward, as long as we have this structure of our two centre-backs wide and then one central midfielder kind of on the top of the arc right here, there should usually be an option to either play wide or play in and then set wide, okay? And if they're going to send enough players that none of those options are on, then we probably just have to bypass and go into our fullbacks a little bit earlier. But, I think a simple little fix here would have been into Kaylin and back out. And Kaylin, you probably just could have helped Maria a little bit with your positioning through this play.